beautiful downtown Millheim, in the smack dab center of the Keystone State, this is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass, the podcast that's mostly about food and drink in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to episode 43, Pairing Food and Beer. I remember my first beer dinner. It was at the Brickskeller, a legendary beer bar in D.C., and it was 1987 when I was living in suburban Maryland and working at Walter Reed Hospital. The Brick had a back room with a small stage, and they would do events there featuring beer celebrities. That first event was with Dick Yuengling and featured Yuengling Premium, Lord Chesterfield, the celebrated Pottsville Porter, and the then brand new Yuengling Lager. I'd like to tell you that I remember the pairings, but honestly I don't. Mostly I remember that Dick seemed very nervous. Years later, while interviewing him, I brought this night up, only to learn that it was his first public appearance, and he was very nervous. The first time I remember really thinking about beer and food as a thing to be consciously put together, though, was after a Pilsner tasting I did with the Malt Advocate staff in 1994, back before it was called Whiskey Advocate, when it was a beer magazine. We tasted something like 12 Pilsners that night, crisp and hoppy, and when it was over, I was struck by an absolute craving for a steak or a big, juicy burger. It made me think. And 2 years later, well, I was hosting beer dinners myself, talking to chefs who were sometimes very interested, sometimes not so much. I was experimenting with cooking with beer at home and quickly learned that as much as I liked hoppy beers, they didn't do well in food unless it was something like a salad dressing. Cooking them concentrated the bitterness. Malty beers, on the other hand, made a great base for stews and sauces. Lesson learned. I went to other people's dinners, too. The time from about 2002 to 2014 was a golden age for beer dinners in America. Before that, there really wasn't enough good knowledge out there or enough different beers. After that, the field got cluttered with so many events that brewers were shouting and pairing crazy stuff. There were good dinners before and after that period, but there were just so many in those 12 years. I would be remiss if I didn't note the incredible string of excellent beer dinners, legendary beer dinners at Monk's Cafe in Philadelphia, which continue today. People still talk about the all-lambic beer dinner that Michael Jackson hosted there back in 2003, 2004. I was there, and it was off the hook. Incredible food, incredible beer, brilliantly matched with expert commentary on both. At the time, I asked Monk's co-owner, Tom Peters, why some of the dishes weren't on the regular menu. I'd lose money making them every day, he said. That's what beer dinners were like at the peak. Some of the best pairings I remember from those Golden Age events, some quite unexpected, were grilled octopus and Brooklyn black chocolate stout, where the sweet flesh and the grill char amped up the sweet roasty beer. That was at Monk's, as was an escargot en croûte with Allagash Interlude, a Saison-style beer brewed with a Brettanomyces yeast, a dry yet slightly fruity beer that balanced the sweet, unctuous snails and buttery pastry. I had a green salad with caramelized pecans and Yard's Old Ale at the Yard's Brewery with a happy vibe between the nuts and the semi-sweet earthy ale. Rogue Morimoto Soba Ale paired with Otoro Tuna Belly at Moriboto's in Philly. The beer quite astringent, the tuna quite fatty, but reaching their full potential together, an eye-opening pairing. I still have a bottle of soba signed by Chef Morimoto. That was a good night. So why did these beer and food pairings work? And honestly, for that matter, did they work? Or was it simply the power of suggestion, a chef or brewer or writer saying, this is the pairing, and you looking around the room and thinking, yes, the Emperor's clothes are wonderful. So what is the benefit of thinking about beer and food pairing? And would just any beer do? Good beer, good food? Isn't that all we need? These are all fair questions, and all ones I think about regularly. I've thought about doing a dinner with deliberately mismatched beer and food, pairings that absolutely do not work, and then serving a second beer that does, 5 minutes after the first. There's also a dinner I did get to do in Athens, Ohio, some years back, a dinner with beers paired with traditional Arab-influenced dishes, food that maybe culturally never knew beer before. That was fun, and we found that beer could definitely go places it had never gone. truth be told, it's all fun, and that's the point. So we'll have a fun interview with a good friend of mine, another writer who does a lot of beer and food pairing, and then a kind of artistic visit from another friend who's madly prolific with beer and food pairing. You'll see some of her artwork in this episode's Instagram post. Then I'll tell you about a recent pairing I did, just for Kathy and I, and our friends John and Susan Dubosky, with a fantastic BYOB meal at Revival Kitchen, the farm-to-table restaurant in Reedsville that is arguably, and deservedly, the hottest reservation in all of central PA. Several of the pairings were good. The dessert pairing was exceptional, if I do say so myself. But before we get to any of that, I need to explain why this episode is late, and what we're going to do about that. Simply put, it's late because my 93-year-old mother wound up in the hospital last week, and I dropped everything to go down to Lancaster to be with her and make sure she was all right. She's doing better, finally, so I came home to get a little rest, see Kathy, and get some work done. I hope to have this out on the 16th, and I'll put the word out when I do, which, by the way, is a good time for a reminder. If you subscribe or follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or any podcast source, you'll automatically get notification of anything new. So do that. Luckily, I have material ready for 2 more episodes, so it won't be too hard to get another one ready for the following Thursday, the 25th, which will put us back on schedule. And with that, here's what I'm drinking and eating today. Well, with the topic, it seemed like I should pair a beer with food. So I've got a can of Axeman Cerveza Mexican-style lager, properly chilled, with a nice room temperature slice of Havarti cheese from Dutch Country Cheese in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania. Dutch Country is a retail outlet for local cheesemakers in Lancaster and Chester counties. They have a great store on Route 322 that I can heartily recommend you visit. The Axeman was a sample dropped off by my friend Tim Roberts, who you met in the last episode. He'd made a sales call at Axeman earlier that day. Why Cerveza and Havarti? True story. I was working up some beer and cheese pairings for a story with one of the cheesemongers at DeBruno Brothers in Philly. 10 years or more ago. But I still remember the moment when we poured a cold Corona, really more for a laugh than as a serious tasting proposition, and took a bite of a pretty simple cheddar with it, and a pure look of, what the what? Bloomed on both our faces. Turns out that the simple sweetness of a Mexican-type lager and the energetic scrub of the carbonation makes a great pairing with a firm cheese like cheddar, or Colby, or Havarti. Let's have a taste. The beer, the Cerveza, it looks exactly like what you'd expect. It's pale yellow. It's got a very white, very finely bubbled head. And honestly, it smells like beer. It's a faintly sweet, grainy smell. Maybe a little bit of floral hop. Cold and clean. A little bit of bitter on the end. And that's exactly what you want on a day like this. Wow. Yeah, exactly what I want. The cheese. I let the cheese sit out for a few hours. It's nice and supple. Firm but not hard. Has that creamy tang of Havarti. Not quite sweet. Rich, but not too fatty. Really no hint of funk or sourness or any of that like you would expect from a farmhouse cheese. All right. I'm going to take another little bite of cheese and hit it with the beer. I could feel the effect of the pairing spread through my mouth. It was the wildest thing. I had the cheese in my mouth, well spread, took the sip of beer, and it was like there was a river of brightness came back through the middle of my mouth and then just spread out. The cheese was suddenly lighter, and a little bit of bitterness really popped the richness of the cheese. Oh, yeah. And then the carbonation really lifts the fattiness of the cheese off the tongue, freshens things up, makes every... it makes not just the chew, but every moment fresh again. Wow, that's good. That's so simple and yet so delicious. And that's how a good pairing works. So there you have it. And that means that it's time for Smack Dab in the Center, sponsored by the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. Folks, as I am recording this, it is a scorcher out there. I broke a sweat just tossing the ball for Pippin, and that was at 7 a.m. When it's this hot in Center County, you either stay inside, boring, or you go swimming at one of our great state parks. Here in Millheim, we get on the gravel road over the ridge and head to the primitively pristine beauty of Poe Valley State Park. There's a cool lake with a swimming beach tucked into a wooded valley with plenty of shade and picnicking pavilions. Over the ridge, Bald Eagle State Park has 1,200 feet of beach. It's plenty of room for the whole family, plus boat launches, with a whole lot of sea room on the 1,700-acre lake. You can camp, and the town of Howard is right there, with shops and restaurants. But the gem of Center County's state parks is Black Moshannon. 3,400 acres of park, surrounded by 67 square miles of state forest, with a nice little reservoir and a sandy beach for swimming. Swimming at Black Mo comes with a uniquely colorful touch. The tannins collected from acres of sphagnum moss bogs color the lake a tea-like shade of clear, harmless orange-brown. Quite refreshing. Take a trip, take a dip at some of Center County's natural attractions. Pairing beer with food is not a thing that was done until maybe 40 years ago, at least not widely done. There was food, there was beer, you had dinner. No one really thought much about the food and beer you were putting together. There were regional foods that would be normal for a time of year, oysters on the coast in months without an R, fresh fruit and tomatoes and other truck in the summer, hams and sausages in the cold weather, and the beers that were there. Stouts for those oysters, light ales for the fruit of the land, fest beer and lambic for the rich, fatty foods of winter. That's the beer that was there. Those were the foods that were available. It's a cliche from wine pairing, an older and much more revered calling that says, what grows together, goes together. It works for wines, and it works for beer, too. Is it because beers and foods of a certain type both do well in an area because of the water, the soil, or the microbiome, as if God planned it? Or, more likely, is it that brewers developed beers that tasted good with the local cuisine and could be made with the local ingredients? A little of the first, probably more of the second, giving the more intentional nature of brewing. And we still lean on that paradigm. But now that we have so many beers available, well outside where they may have originated, and people make any type of food they want, or that they think may sell, like falafel in Atlanta or barbecue in Minneapolis. Well, we're kind of winging it. We were all playing around with beer and food pairing, some more successfully than others, when something happened that had a huge influence, at least in the United States. In 2003, Brooklyn Brewery brewmaster Garrett Oliver put out his book, The Brewmaster's Table. It's hard to overstate what an effect this book had. A small number of us had experienced thoughtful beer and food pairings. An even smaller number had done that thinking. There were few guides to it, and those were fragmentary. Now suddenly a full tome fell into our laps, written by someone who was not only a brewmaster, who knew the flavors of the wide palette of beer, but was also an enthusiastic epicure who took every opportunity to sample the world's foods. It was revelatory in its breadth, and it's still quite relevant. I would recommend you get a copy. Garrett Oliver, The Brewmaster's Table. It was also hugely helpful spreading the word of good beer. I remember talking to a beer importer who said that he'd bought a case of the books so that his sales reps could go directly to the chef at fine dining restaurants and give them a copy when they gave them samples of their beers. The chefs would be inspired and demand that the restaurants serve the beers. And it worked. I don't have an interview with Garrett, but I did talk to John Holl, the publisher of All About Beer, host of the popular Think Beer, Drink Beer, and Steal This Beer podcasts, and, more pertinent to this maybe, the author of The Craft Brewery Cookbook, The American Craft Beer Cookbook, and Dishing Up New Jersey. He knows a lot about pairing beer and food. And you'll hear a funny story about when he had to pair up an unplanned beer dinner on the fly in Spain a few years back. You'll enjoy it. Now, as I said, John is an old friend, so we rambled a bit, but we're also both pros, and there's a wealth of good information here. We recorded this at the Victory Brewing Pub in Center City, Philadelphia, so there is some background noise. Think of it as beery ambiance. Hey, I'm at Victory Brewing's new place in Center City, Philadelphia with my good friend John Holl.
Hi. Hello. This is fitting.
In what way?
I feel... I believe now we've been to all of the Victory Brewing locations now, together, having a drink together.
No, I have not been to Kennett Square.
Oh, there's another one in town?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
all right.
I know.
Well, then for the next episode, we're going to go there, and then that'll make sense. All right.
It'll all
well,
be
we've
good.
been to the other ones in the outskirts of town, but yeah. Okay. And great. I've already ruined your podcast.
No, it's a lot like this.
I was all excited because we've been to the other locations and we've had really good times at the other locations.
Yeah,
we've
we
drank
had a great time.
A lot of IPA at the other locations, and so I was excited. I thought this was fitting when we booked that we were going to do this, then
this is really nice, especially when we found out that it used to be a TGI Fridays.
Yeah, I mean it's
yeah. So that's a really bad segue, but TGI Fridays.
Right.
I wanted to talk to you about food and beer.
Sure.
I mean, especially because we're
goes well with potato skins. With microwaved potato skins.
So we're doing an event tonight where we're pairing beer and whiskey. Mm-hmm. We're also doing some food, but mostly it's about the beer and whiskey.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have both done similar events, usually with food rather than drink. We know our way around this. What are you looking for when you set up a pairing, both the individual pairings and kind of the overall evening, the arc of the tastings, if you want?
So for me, I don't know if the beer comes first or the food comes first, right? Because so much of it is seasonality, and I love being able... Beer is so seasonal, or used to be at least, and when you can get back into, okay, these types of beers maybe taste better in the spring, or are only released in the spring, or whatever it is, that kind of thing. I start thinking about that and some of those flavors, and then, okay, what's growing right now, or what's in season, or, from there. But even if somebody was like, okay, you're going to go to a TGI Fridays, and you're going to pick from the menu, and seasons don't exist there. It's like Vegas. There's no clocks, and the windows are blacked out, and everything is, there's no fire in the kitchen. It's all microwaves kind of thing. Like, you can still build a really fun beer menu off of even all of the macro stuff and all of the other things, the macro stuff in the generic Cisco truck, type food. I think a lot of it is the intention behind it, and for me, it's always finding the flavor bridges. So if it's one flavor or two flavors in the glass, and one flavor or two flavors on the plate, not everything has to sync up perfectly. But if you can match one thing with one thing, and then another thing with another thing, and draw people through and say, this is why I did this. It's, we're having a honey baked ham, and here's like a honey kolsch.
Yeah, the explanation part is crucial.
Sure, and it's also that power of suggestion as well, right? I mean, there's been times where I've been thrown into a beer dinner. I remember being in Spain once, and that's why I bring up this honey thing. But I was in Spain once, and there's a guy who was supposed to do a beer dinner, and he canceled at the last minute. And so they came up to me with 25 minutes before, people were already seated, and they're like, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "Sure, if you give me the notes, give me the pairings." And they're like, "Oh, we haven't picked the beers yet."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?
Oh my God.
What?" And so they're like, "Here are the beers that you can pick from."
Was this a game show?
Right. It felt like a Japanese game show or something like that, where I'm looking around for the cameras, and it's like how much can we screw up all here right now? And there's a language barrier and everything, but the menu was set, so I'm like, okay. And it's sponsored by certain breweries, so it was during a festival. So they're just getting me pictures from the festival floor and bringing it into this back room. It was in this bullfighting ring.
Oh my God!
That was not actively bullfighting at the time because there was a beer festival. So the whole thing is just weird to begin with. And so they're like, okay, here are samples of 18 different beers or 12 different beers that you can pick from, and here are the preset dishes. And I'm like, can I taste the dishes? And they're like, no. It's like, okay. So I'm looking at the
You can look at
descriptions.
these Chinese restaurant photos of the food.
I'm trying to figure all of this stuff out, and I was like, okay, like we're just gonna make this work. And the last one that I got stuck on was they had, and you think our jobs are cool. They had a ham guy.
Oh.
So he's the guy that travels with the leg of ham. And he's there, and when he shows up, this is a whole new thing for me. This is an aside, but he shows up and then he weighs it in front of the hosts. And
Really?
So this is the starting weight.
Okay.
And then at the end, after he's cut it off, it's the finishing weight, and then you pay for the difference in weight.
And
kind
he
of
packs
thing.
what's left up
and goes off to the next
place.
thing, right? Yeah. So he's there, and he's this guy, and he's dressed like a New York City sommelier, right? He's got the blue blazer. He's very proud of himself. He's got the sharpest knife, and he's slicing these very thin. He's smiling the whole time at the crowd while he's doing it, and he's laying it down, and people are eating it, and it's delicious. And it was, what's the beer to go along with this? And this is where that honey Kolsch played in, where I'm just tasting all the different beers, and I was like, I think maybe this one, but I couldn't figure out why. And then eventually it came to me during the dinner that it was like, oh, honey baked ham.
Of course.
And that's a tough thing to also explain to Spaniards.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
So there's this thing in strip malls where you can go and get a honey baked ham, and it's big on Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving, anybody? Hello, yeah. So it wasn't great. But the thing that I didn't realize, and so it's like goes with like, or you're finding things like that. To finish out the ham story, though, the guy is just carving the entire time that I'm talking. We're getting questions from the audience, and there's a translator, and so it's taking a little bit longer for everything to get through. And I'm having a good time. We've had a couple of beers, the ham is flowing,
right.
It's piling up. I don't realize that he's getting charged by the pound. He doesn't stop until the event is over.
Oh, God.
So we're talking for like 20 minutes, taking questions, and everybody's having a good time and having an extra beer. And at some point, like, I look over and I can see the organizer, who is just kind of like starting to lose his mind. And I'm like, I can't figure out why.
Right.
And then about 2 minutes later, he just comes up and grabs the mic from me, and gracias, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, and just like the program is over.
There will be no more.
Like, there are no more questions. And the guy immediately stopped.
Really?
Because he had said the program is over, and that was it. And so later on that night, we're out to dinner at 2 a.m. because it's Spain, and
right.
Life hates me when I'm there. And we're there, and I somebody from the organization tells me, he's like, so that was like $1,200 worth of, and I was like,
oh my God.
If somebody had told me,
why didn't someone stop the ham man?
You could have stopped me early. I was just bullshitting to give people a good time. So anyway, it was one of those. Yeah.
Wow.
But for me, it's finding like with like. So with a lot of the modern IPAs, it's kind of tough because it has those tropical notes to them. And is it all just coconut cream pie desserts? Is it all just, vanilla fruit? Like it's a really, those some of the more modern beers that are out there, even some of the gozas or the fruited kettle sours, are really tough to get along with food wise. But some of them work. Like you can turn them into sorbet, and now all of a sudden it's just, hey, this is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's not a pairing anymore. It's the beer and the food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, pairings are finding something that's in the glass that can complement or contrast in a good way something that's on the plate, and working with salts or acids or bitter or sweet or whatever. But no two are the same, and that's also kind of a fun thing.
No two beers are pairings?
Beer dinners are the same because somebody's IPA in Pennsylvania is going to be different from the IPA that I'm serving in Jersey or Ohio or wherever. So it's, there's always going to be something. But if you say to somebody, this is why I did it, they're going to go along with it. It's the power of suggestion, right? When you're doing whiskey tastings or I'm doing beer tastings, then all right, everybody take a sniff out of your glass, and boy, you can really get the grapefruit pith, can't you? And then you go, oh yeah, grapefruit pith, and it's I just
the dog hears the whistle.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and if you the more obscure something you say is like, I get cherry pits that have been out in the sun in August, and it's like, oh yeah, cherry pits in August. Yeah, it's like.
Oh boy. We're really looking behind the curtain on this one. So
I try not to do that, but
is this easy? Did it take you years of experience, or is it just thinking about it?
It's not easy. I was really lucky food-wise. I had two grandmothers that had two very different approaches to food. So my dad's grandma, my paternal grandmother, Ukrainian descent, first generation, and would cook from the hip. She had 7 children, and her philosophy was start with an onion. So sometimes an onion gets chopped up and go in a soup pot, sometimes you go in a frying pan, sometimes you go in a roasting dish, wherever. But she'd always start with an onion. And then whatever was in the pantry, whatever was in the freezer, whatever was in, she'd just start cooking for 7. And, there was recipes that she followed or developed over time to her taste, but there was no set plan. And there were familiar Eastern European flavors that would come through, Western European flavors that would come through. But she would also Americanize some stuff, and there was, my grandfather was Irish and English and Dutch and whatever. So, there's those sensibilities as well, along with the, Slavic, Ukrainian, Russian background. But my maternal grandmother, also first generation, came from Ireland, and she was very much a post-World War II better living through chemistry, everything frozen is better kind of thing, right? And she lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment in our hometown, and she would go and get the Gordon's fish sticks, or she would go and get the pre-cooked chicken breasts, or like whatever it was, kind of thing. But she would always add something fresh to it. So if she was doing the Gordon's fish sticks, she would always have a fresh lemon and maybe a bunch of fresh dill to put it on there. So it wasn't just, okay, this is what big conglomerate food wants you to have. Yeah. I'm going to put a little bit of love or a little bit of something on it. And from there, I was able to, from an early age, taste different flavors and different things and understand that it shouldn't just be taken at face value. There should be some stuff on it. And then when I started in news when I was 16, I worked for a public television station in New Jersey. And, as reporters, we go to wherever the news is, and then wherever the restaurant is next to the news, that's where we're going. And covering Jersey as this melting pot where sometimes you're in Cuban American territory, or sometimes you're in Korean, or, it's halal, or it's Italian, or it's Polish, or whatever. In my teen years and into my 20s and beyond, as a reporter, I got to experience all of these different flavors, and you'd talk to chefs and folks in the kitchen and be like, what is that spice, or what is it that I'm so it's easier now to pull out flavors of beer that are in beers and say, it's it's this, it's kimchi, or oh wow, that's definitely saffron, or whatever it is, but it came from years of being a curious eater and a curious taster. And then when I look at an ingredients list, I'll try to get it from a chef before a dinner, and not just the final thing, but how are you preparing it? And then I'll look for that kimchi or that saffron or that something, and it's okay, well, maybe a West Coast IPA will go really well with this, or I don't know, an English brown ale or something, or let's go with an imperial stout for dinner, whatever it is, to try to find those one or two things. But it just comes with time at this point.
You've written books about beer. You've also written books about food.
Yeah, 3 altogether. Yeah, three cookbooks.
Yeah,
3 cookbooks.
And one of them is really focused in on the pairing.
Yes.
Yeah, one?
No, all 3 of them.
Okay.
2 of them. One is all about New Jersey.
Right.
And that's just celebrating Jersey as the greatest food state in the nation. But the other 2 are about pairing beer with food. And the big complaints that I get on the Amazon stuff, on the Amazon is, I thought this was going to be about cooking with beer. And it's no. It very clearly says pairings, how to pair with your favorite brews, which is not a word that I like, but, so those are the 3-star reviews. I thought you're going to use beer in the recipes. And it's it's so boring, and it's such a cop-out, right?
Yeah.
There's a few examples though where we do it, and Victory is actually one of them. In the American Craft Beer Cookbook, there's the Victory beer cheese soup, which was the staple at the restaurant forever.
Yeah, they sold it at Wegmans for quite a while.
Right, and it's delicious, and I don't understand why people would make beer cheese soup at home. when you
could
should just go to the brewery and have them do it. It is such a mess to make. It is so difficult. And it's never as good.
No.
Right?
No. You're not making it every day.
No. So it's just, when you look at your kitchen and it's just a mess, and why is the cheese burnt to the bottom of this all clad? Yeah. Let's go to the brewery down the street and get their beer cheese soup. So it is more about pairing than cooking with beer, because unless you're going to do it properly, it's going to be really boring, right? So that there's some recipes that I would see where it's, okay, take 1 ounce of beer.
An ounce.
An ounce of beer.
Really?
And it's like, what does that do? Like, that's doing absolutely nothing except giving me 11 ounces to drink out of the can. Now, cool. So if you're going to do it, you have to go big with it.
Yeah.
It has to be empty a 6-pack into a Dutch oven, get out your meat, and now, we're going to do whatever it is.
Yeah.
So pairing is better. You're also changing the flavor of the beer, and it's not the way that the brewer wanted you to have it.
Right.
So all of a sudden now, if the recipe is weird, it's like, oh, well, that beer's not good. It's like, no, you just added 6 pounds of garlic to it, and that's not supposed to be.
So it seems to me that beer dinners are not as common as they were, say, 10 or 15 years ago. What happened? Did we just get bored?
I think we got bored. I think customers got bored.
I mean, there's new customers all the time.
Yeah. But, here we are in Victory. It's, 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. It's fairly crowded in here. To do a beer dinner, they would have to shut down this space maybe at 4. Maybe you're going to get, ticketed. Like, I think it became an economical thing for a lot of breweries, where they started saying, okay, we'd make X amount having a beer dinner, where our staff is now running extra hard, or we're going to make Y, which is more than X, and our staff knows exactly how to swing beers, and the kitchen doesn't have to do anything special, and we're going to be even more crowded than we would without a beer dinner. Why are we doing beer dinners? And
so we don't really have to educate people as much anymore, because it's more part of the commonality?
I think so. The idea of not having to educate people, I don't agree with, because I think that the education is more important than ever. And this event that we're doing tonight, I think is so critically important for that kind of thing, to have that conversation about education, about flavors, about reminding people what it is that you're drinking and why. But beer dinners for a long time were a great way to do that, but I think it became an economic thing. And then COVID kind of killed it as well. And it's, some of these beer dinners, if it's $100 or $120 for 2, like, all of a sudden that's a good chunk of change for a lot of folks, when your bar tab would be half that for a normal night out kind of thing. And who's this guy who's talking like that? And I get it. I just did a beer dinner at the Wall and Paul Pack Brewery, which I know you know, and it's been on the show, and you talked about it. But it's they did a really beautiful and really wonderful beer dinner, but they also shut down the brewery in order to do it. And it's like, thanks, I appreciate that, but you guys okay? Like, that's busy Sunday in summer. Get out so Holl can talk about beer and food pairing for a few minutes. Holl's going to wax about his grandmother's and, that kind of thing. So
you're waiting for people to beat you in the parking lot.
I just wanted a pint. So I think it's harder. And I also think that a lot of the breweries that have opened up in the last pre-pandemic, let's say 18, 19, that kind of thing, they didn't have to have a food program. People were just walking in.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. So many food trucks. How does that affect pairing?
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
The example that I like to use is a couple years ago, I was at the California Brewers Conference, and we were in Sacramento, and we're walking from the convention center to a brewery because we all wanted lunch. It's, I don't know, 1 p.m. And we heard the good things about this brewery, and I'm walking with a couple of other reporters and some brewers and everything, and somebody goes, they have food there, right, as we're walking? And somebody's like, oh, wait, let me check. And they go onto the website as we're walking over, and they're like, oh, they have a food truck. And we're like, great. You know, because, like, if it's a burger, it's a taco, like, whatever, it's food. And the guy who's reading the phone stopped, and he's like, wait a minute, it's a gelato truck.
Oh, my God.
And we're like, well, no. So it's like, well, let's just call and confirm, you know? And, like, I don't know the last time you've called a brewery, but, like, when the phone rings and somebody picks up, hello? Like, they're confused about the phone ringing. And it's just like, hey, just want to confirm that, like, you have a food truck. And like, yeah. It's like, and is it a gelato truck? It's like, yeah. It's like, do you have anything else? No. Great. Thanks. Where's the nearest brewery with a good food truck or food? And that's where we went. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's you're at the mercy of food
Whoever
trucks.
can show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are food trucks and breweries that care about that relationship, though, and work back and forth. So I was in Connecticut last year, and I forget the name of the brewery, but, you know, stopped at the food truck, grabbed the menu, went inside, and, you know, you text them and they walk into you. And the woman who's running the food truck said, well, what beers did you order? And I said, I got this and I got this. And she goes, all right, it's my recommendation that this on our menu would go really well with that, and that this with this, and then, you know, save room for dessert because, like, our churros go really well with, you know, like, our bourbon maple imperial. It's like, obviously they do. And, but like way to upsell and get me to stay for another beer. Right. And I did, and it was great, and it was an easy pairing and a smart pairing, but nonetheless there was that synergy that existed between the truck outside and the tap room inside,
which I assume happens if they become a regular.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know how frequent, like, this was me passing through on an afternoon. But that attention to detail was great.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend, Em Sauter, who does pints and panels.
Visual beer education.
She does a shit ton of pairing. Not just with food. She pairs beers with activities, with music, with movies, with characters from movies.
Yeah.
Does that hold up? Is it largely for fun? Is it... I don't.
Em knows how I feel
I gotta be honest.
This.
Sometimes I look at these and I'm just like, is this subversive?
Yeah. The good thing is that Em doesn't listen to podcasts. And I know this because she hosts a podcast for All About Beer and doesn't listen to that one. So now I think part of that is fun, right?
Yeah,
and I think that part of it sparks debate, which I really like. When here's IPA, or, you know, what IPA styles go best with Taylor Swift's song.
Yes.
It gets people screaming and yelling. Or, you know, like, what kind of rustic saison is this Star Wars character? Or, like, you know, like, those types of things. There's no right or wrong answer with all of that. However, when she does the beer and soul food, when she does the beer and Ukrainian cuisine, when she does the beer and whatever dishes, she's consulting with,
she's not picking shit out of a list.
Right, and she's talking with people who know. And the thing that I actually really like about her art, there's a lot of things that I like about her art, is that she strives for accuracy in the drawings. So we talked about this a while back, she and I, but when she writes about 18th century London and the birth of porter, and she draws people in clothing, like the brewer, the fictional brewer.
She's researched
the clothing of like, well, the shirts had 4 buttons instead of today's modern 6. Or, you know, like corduroy didn't exist, so I'm not going to do that patterning. Or like whatever it is kind of thing. So when she's drawing those foods, she's actually running that up the flagpole and being like, this isn't just squiggles on a page. Does this look, in my art, how it would look, you know, on a plate kind of thing. And so those types of things I think are great, but it just stops with, you know, X dish and Y beer. It's not why these two would work. And I'd love to see a deeper level. I know that's harder in what she's doing, but I hope that and this is where the education thing comes in, right? So if somebody took one of Em's drawings and went to like a soul food restaurant and was like, okay, I'm going to order the oxtail and the greens. and I've been told through Em Sauter that I need, a Kolsch for that, or I forget whatever the pairing is, but like let's just say that, right? If the education is there from that drinker, saying, okay, I'm going to take a bite, I'm going to take a sip, and now I get why she's saying it, great. If you're my dad, if you're, one of my brothers who doesn't, pay attention to this type of thing or care necessarily, but just wants to eat and drink and have a good time, that lack of explainer, I think, is what we're missing right now, where it's, look for the sweetness of the beef and, the little bit of hickory in the sauce to go along with the molasses note that comes out of the brown porter, or like whatever, I'm just like throwing nonsense out there, but that's what we're missing. And so the visual education is great. Getting people to think about things in those ways is even better, but there does need to be that extra push, like over the line.
Yeah. I have this idea that I've never been able to get anyone to do with me for a beer dinner.
Listen, just stop right now.
Yeah.
I'm in.
I think it's
100%. We're going to do it at my house. I'll cook. I'll get the beer. You name your charity.
I want to make a menu of pairings that don't work.
Perfect.
Essentially,
absolutely. That's my house.
That it's not bullshit. You see what I mean? But then have another beer that then does work.
So the snarkiness in me is just, well, it's hazy IPA with everything. And then for dessert,
I was thinking kettle sour, but okay.
That's for dessert. We're having, it's kettle sours and fettuccine Alfredo or something.
I can see the sauce breaking already. It's just like my mouth is suddenly full of curds. I don't get it.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said for that as well. But I also wonder if somebody went in knowing that, they're going to be looking. It's that power of suggestion, right? They're going to go in knowing, okay, we've been set up for failure here. I would love to be able to do something like that.
So now you're describing like a Psych 101 experiment.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. When does the experiment begin? It's already begun.
Yeah.
Because if you get out there with all of the excitement and the energy and stuff, what I really love is like the dragon fruit and the lactobacillus that's coming through of this kettle sour and how it's reacting with the Parmesan and the heavy cream and how it really is just, and you look out there and you're going to see like some of the skeptics, but they're, okay. I mean, he's written books. He must know what he's talking about. I think that could be something.
And what do you wait? 3 courses before you drop it?
Right. With the refund checks. Right. I think that's the thing. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been part of my performance art this evening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry. Coming back to it. What, and I mean, we've already talked about this some, but what's the value of the whole exercise? Is it learning more about food? Is it learning more about beer? Learning more about yourself? I don't get too carried away there on that one, sorry. Or is it just fun?
I think it's fun. I like this question. I'm going to go in a weird way with this.
Okay.
We're too siloed these days. We are too, and I'll even say this about myself, right? But the echo chamber that exists on social media has put us all in various boxes of beliefs, ideas, cultures, whatever. And it was designed to broaden the world and make the world a better place, right? The thing that I still love about breweries, and the thing that I still love about going into restaurants that me as a middle-aged white guy from suburban New Jersey may not look like I belong in when I go in there, because I don't speak the language and I'm just going to trust, and I might point at the menu and just be like, okay, like, here we go. Like, going from there. It's about exploration, and we've lost some of that. And so I like going to breweries because I can sit next to somebody who maybe doesn't have the same political ideals that I do. and we're both there for the beer. So that's a starting place, right? Because these days it's everybody, you know, who's on one side or the other are so far apart that we've forgotten about the commonalities of things. And as a reporter, I love talking to people and I love experiencing new things. And I can sometimes put my personal beliefs aside and just be like, can you tell me why you think that? Or can you tell me like where you heard that or why that resonates with you right now? Mm-hmm. And it's, okay, thank you for sharing that insight with me. Like, I appreciate that. And then we can clink glasses because we're both there for the beer. And so the exercise is fun, but it also, this should be the great leveler. Food and breaking bread with each other and getting together around a big table or a small table and sharing the most basic and common of human experiences of sharing food together. We're missing some of that. And I think COVID didn't help. But even before that, I think that it's just, well, I don't want to talk to that person because they fly a certain flag in their front lawn, or, you know, I don't want to talk to that person because, you know, they like rainbows, or like whatever it is. And we're missing out on, well, what brings us together, right? If beer brings us together, cool. What else do we have in common? Are both of our kids in softball? Cool, right? Did we both grow up rooting for the Yankees, or like what, you know, like whatever it is? Like, oh, yeah, my grandmother also served fresh lemon with fish sticks, kind of, because she read it in Better Housekeeping in 1961. Like whatever it is. That's why I like doing this, because I think that there is still there's still people. And when I get out of the cities and do these types of things, especially, there's people who have different political, philosophical, religious, etc. Beliefs, but they're all there for one purpose. And they're sitting next to each other and they're breaking bread, and nobody's screaming at each other like it's a cable news station or something. And for just a minute, it's cool. Uh-huh. And I like that. And maybe it's an altruistic or an unrealistic idea of what the world can be. And this is not an American thing. This is a global thing. Yeah. But it's a privilege to do this and to be able to communicate and to get in front of people and all of that. And if it can just be like, hey, you like one guy and this guy likes another guy, but you both like this Hellas in front of you, like, you're still neighbors. Yeah. Like, maybe you don't hate each other, actually, because you both like the same thing. And I remember in 2016 going around, I was in the Midwest a lot in 2016, and you'd see breweries that had, and I'm painting with a very broad brush here, but a Prius in the parking lot parked next to a F-150 kind of thing, and you'd go inside, and those folks who were driving those cars were sitting right next to each other. And, you know, like, they might have been nervous about what the other side was planning politically or like whatever, still drinking beer. And now here we are 8 years later, and it's...
We just did that Maybach thing.
Yeah.
One of the places we stopped was Last Minute, and that's all they had, like 8-person tables.
Yeah.
So, you know, we wound up talking to people, and, you know, mostly we talked about beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to get people who try to bait you. You're going to get people who, and... I'm fortunate as a reporter and that's still how you know, we were talking before this started about like beer famous and everything else, and you know, like your kids seeing you that way, and my daughter seeing me that way and everything else like that. But like, I still see myself first and foremost as a journalist professionally, and so I'm naturally curious and, you know, registered independent on purpose, and, you know, try to experience things on all sides. And I found that when I just have simple conversations with somebody at the table where it's just like, okay, you're trying to bait me because I'm from Blue, New Jersey and whatever. Cool. But why? Like, what do you get out of that at the end of the day? And like, can we just have a conversation about something else? Or if you want to have like a deep conversation aside from talking points, cool. Like, I'm up for it.
Yeah.
You know, because like my politics are probably a little bit more aligned than you think. But so it's one of those, bringing people together through beer, through food, is a basic human experience. And in-person interaction, I think people are a little bit more polite than maybe they are as keyboard warriors and online. So I'd love to see that.
I mean, that whole thing about, you know, the nation America was born in taverns.
Yeah. like plotting ideals to make the country better, not to,
Yes.
it's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy question to wrap up. Some of your favorites, beer and food pairings.
I still love IPA and cheesecake. I'm sorry, carrot cake. IPA and carrot cake,
Okay.
I think, is one of those great pairings that like confuses people at first.
Uh-huh.
That I'm still a really big fan of.
I had Imperial Stout and grilled octopus one time. I was just like, what the hell? Brilliant. It was one of the best pairings I've ever
Sure,
had.
because of the char, right?
Yep.
It's the char of the octopus and then the char of the malt.
And the sweetness of
Yes.
the octopus. Yeah, it really works well.
Which comes through.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. I mean, even again, like IPA I love just because it's so versatile, right? But like a good old school West Coast IPA and Maytag Blue.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a fun, easy pairing, and you keep pouring the beer and you keep picking at the cheese, and it's it's a lot of fun. I like the simple ones. I mean, there's things like shishito peppers and Kolsch.
Ooh, yeah.
That I think is also kind of fun. And then a burger and an ice cold porter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like ice cold, like middle of the summer, igloo cooler, half water, half ice. Looks like the Delaware in February kind of thing.
Pulling
and
you reach out of there.
And you're pulling Sierra Nevada Porter when they made it. Pulling those stubby bottles out, the Heritage bottles out, and just popping one of those with a burger, ice cold, right out of the bottle in your hand. Yeah, that's still one of my favorite. Bring back the porters.
Yeah. All right, that's all I got. Thanks,
Tom.
John.
Thank you.
Good time. Thanks, John. Let's talk a bit about why beer makes such a versatile vehicle for pairing. You have to reach beyond what people usually think when they think beer. When I say beer, most people immediately picture a glass filled with a yellow liquid topped with white foam. Kind of like the one I just tasted. Beer. It might be very pale yellow or a rich straw gold. It might be a skiff of bubbles in an ice-cold glass or a proud inch of tenacious cream in a dimple mug. But that's stereotypical beer, and it's probably a lager of some kind. It's fizzy. There's either a light sweetness or a light bitterness, depending on the beer, and a drying bitterness at the end. Push past that, though, and you find beers that are caramel sweet, fruity in sweet or tart ways, dark and roasty, tasting of coffee or chocolate, maybe earthy and dry, or brightly acidic, smoky or funky, fizzy, soft, barely carbonated at all, and of course a full range of bitterness and all the aromas of today's hops: pine, papaya, lemon, flowers, pineapple, grass, coconut. There are so many flavors and aromas possible with beer, and the option always exists for the brewer to simply add flavors to a beer, adding fruit, herbs, breakfast cereal, oysters, juniper, berries, or the actual shrub, or barrel aging to add whiskey or wine or rum flavors, or simply the vanillin directly from the oak. If you want to pair a food, you can find a beer for it. The example I like to use is Thanksgiving dinner. How can you find one beer that pairs with roast turkey, gravy, cranberry sauce, oyster or sausage stuffing, green bean casserole, succotash, candied yams, and then the full panoply of pies: pumpkin, pecan, blackberry, lemon meringue? One beer to pair them all? Doesn't exist. I fire a beer shotgun at a meal like that, rolling out a half pint of something light to start, like a pale ale or Kolsch, then beefing it up in the middle with a bigger IPA or fest beer. Wind up the meal with some dry stout, which should get your appetite honed again, and then pull out the big guns for dessert. Imperial Stout, a big pumpkin beer, or a Belgian Double, a beer that deserves more notice at this time of year. You may have to rearrange your plate a little, but it's so good to have the right beer with your food. What is the right beer? How do you figure that out? Well, I reached out to another friend, Em Sauter, to explain how she does it. Em, who John and I mentioned in the interview, is the beer cartoonist behind the popular webcomic Pints and Panels, and her two books, Hooray for Beer and Beers for Everyone. Em is one of the most prolific beer and food pairers I know, putting together 2 or 3 pairing palettes a week up on her Pints and Panels Facebook page. I'm going to quote her on the 4 C's of beer pairing and her brilliant beer as the side dish take. Plus, I'll post, with her permission, the comic panels that go with it on the podcast page. What are the 4 C's? Cut, contrast, clash, and complement. Let's run through them, quoting Em. She uses the example of a green salad with a citrus-based dressing as the food she's pairing a beer with. Cut is when the beer cuts an element of the food. I call it the mouth napkin. The high carbonation of a wit beer will cleanse your palate. Contrast is when a flavor from the beer heightens another flavor. A salty goza will contrast the fruity, sweet dressing. Clash is when the beer and food flavors fight each other, making for a mess. The high ABV of an English barley wine will overwhelm the salad. Complement is when a beer is complementary to the food. A blonde ale will complement the herbal greens and citrus dressing. That's the 4 C's. Obviously, clash is one you want to avoid. I'll give you some more examples when we get to the dinner I paired. But Em had another idea that I found fascinating: the beer as a side dish. Beer acts as fruit, bread, and other great side dishes for food. For example, she says, Hefeweizen adds more fruit to pancakes. Vienna Lager becomes a bready complement to spaghetti and meatballs, I think. She doesn't actually say, but that would be a good pairing for me. A fruit lambic adds more tartness to a cheesecake. All of those sound great, frankly, and the Hefeweizen pancake brings up another good point. Don't be afraid of beer and breakfast. Now, I'm not talking about beer at 8 a.m., but if you're leaning on the breakfast part of brunch, the right IPA will take the place of your mimosa or OJ. A bourbon barrel stout is a fantastic complement to the deep flavors of pancakes with maple syrup and sausage. A garden omelet will sing with a Kolsch as a mouth napkin. And if you're a Scrapple fan, cream ale will cozy right up to that delicious fried stuff. There are very few limits to beer and food pairing. Breakfast, vegetarian, dessert buffet, cheese course, fiery Indian, sweet Asian, the rich moles of Mexico. There's a beer for all of them, usually more than one. Have some fun trying a variety of pairings, and don't be afraid to try something new. And sometimes you have to run with what you have. We got a last-minute chance to have a dinner at Revival Kitchen in Reedsville recently. You don't pass that up. We invited our friends John and Susan Dubosky along. Susan and Kathy had wine with their dinner, and I stole a couple sips of a favorite rosé because why not? But John and I had beer. I got the menu for the dinner online and started checking what I had in the fridge. It was kind of slim pickings. I've been holding off buying beer in anticipation of 4th of July. I picked out a couple, and a couple more. Nothing really big because it was almost an hour drive home. We packed our coolers, met John and Susan, and headed to Reedsville. Revival Kitchen is a house on the main street of town. We walked in and were met with a juicy aroma of strawberries. There were 8 boxes of them sitting on the counter. We were a little early and took the waiter up on his offer to sit us out back under a large tree until our table was ready. It was peaceful and cool, but seeing the happy diners on our way through had my appetite on high alert. When we were seated, the first course was a spring vegetable and herb press pot soup. We were served a shallow bowl with an artfully arranged dome of circled cutouts of various vegetables, squash, carrots, peas, and honestly, things I didn't recognize. Then the waiter presented a French press filled with vegetable broth and herbs, pressed the herbs into the bottom, and poured the hot, fragrant broth over the vegetables. It was easily the best wholly vegetable broth I've ever had. To pair it, I went light with a Mexican-style lager, Kin, from Carbon Copy in Philadelphia. Just right. I'd avoided the clash, and the slight sweetness of the beer complemented the sweet vegetables. Next, well, that was a strawberry and cucumber salad with oil-cured olives, pine nuts, goat cheese, and mint. The strawberries were deep red, at peak, and I had paired them with a fairly standard American pale ale. It was not a great match. It wasn't bad because the bit of fruit complemented, but the bitterness clashed with the berries. At least the salad was great. Now came an aromatic stack of harissa spice wood-fired veggies with a fermented ramp butterbean tahina. Again, delicious and wonderfully fresh. I'd taken a chance here and brought a can of Wallenpaupack Brewing's Pocket Bock, a little 4% malt bomb with a fair hint of smoke to it. Complement to the wood-fired veggies, and maybe a 5th C, a malty cushion to the harissa spice. Harmonious. The main course was a gloriously medium-rare grilled beef strip loin with an exquisite cake of crispy sushi rice topped with shiitake mushrooms and just a dab of miso steak sauce. I had a pretty slam dunk pairing here. Carbon Copy's Bindle Pilsner. The crisp bitterness cut the rich beef, and the herbal hop character was a good contrast to the mild sweetness of the rice. I'd felt pretty confident on Pilsner with grilled red meat, thinking back to my original beer and food awakening. John loves Pilsner, and this one really hit his spot. On to the dessert course. It was a strawberry yuzu shortcake, which had one element that was a bit disappointing, the only one of the whole meal. The shortcake part was a jumbled pile of crunchy bits of cookie, a bit bland. But there were more of those perfect strawberries, and a puddle of light coconut sauce dotted with bright green and red blebs of tart yuzu and sweet strawberry reduction, simply fantastic in appearance. I'll be sure to put it in with the pictures. There were also big blocks of frozen coconut with sprigs of Thai basil. I'm not sure how that was prepared, but it was like a block of unsweetened sorbet. I'd taken a chance on a beer I'd never had. Listener Jay Zaleski had given me some beers from Covered Bridge Brewing in Shamokin, and one was their Sunset Coconut Porter. I had to take a shot with that. Hey, thanks for the beers, Jay. John and I agreed it was the best pairing of the night. The beer was not as sweet as I expected, which made it great for the unsweetened dessert. It was a compliment and a cut simultaneously and left me wanting more. And I don't even like coconut that much. John and I topped the meal off with a short pour of the latest bottling of Heaven Hill's Larceny barrel-proof whiskey, and it was spectacular, as they have been recently. Heaven Hill is nailing this wheated bourbon style. It was a great meal and a successful pairing expedition. With just a bit of willingness to experiment, you can have more from your meal and more from your beer. Can't say no to that. A couple short notes. First, I did get my kegerator reset, and that Sierra Nevada Pale Ale keg recovered very nicely. Then my son brought an exceptional keg up from Philly for 4th of July. Human Robot Czech 10 Lager. Human Robot doesn't sell kegs, but not only have I known owner Ken Carell for years and had him on the podcast, my son used to work for him. So he did one special for us. Paid for it, of course. It was just phenomenal. The first glass poured a little bit foamy, and from then on, it was the smoothest pouring keg I've ever tapped. Clean, briskly bitter with a smooth malt underlayment, Czech-style lager beauty. We enjoyed it immensely. And then on Friday the 5th, we went down to Elk Creek to see Ben Wank's band play. You remember Ben from Plowman Cider. It was a great time, and, well, I wound up inviting the band back to the bar for beers. Oh, what a great time. The neighbors came by, and I love having a little bar in my house. This is going to be fun. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is also in Millheim. I wanted to invite you to come to town for Summerfest on the last weekend of July, the 27th and 28th. There will be plenty of live music both days at Elk Creek Cafe's Creekside venue, at the Millheim Hotel, and at Pisano Winery. There are craft vendors, games, and lots of good local food and drink. I'll be there, so listen for these golden tones and say hi. That's the show. Thanks to John Holl, my good friend, for not only doing the interview, but recording it on his equipment to save us both some time, which, well, we used to have another beer. Time well spent. And thanks to my beer judging pal, Em Sauter, for the use of her cartoons. As always, you can see those episode-related pics on Instagram at Stag Podcast and on Facebook at Seen Through a Glass. If you're listening to the show on the radio at WSOV, there are over 40 more episodes to enjoy, including a Millheim episode and a Nittany Valley episode, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or like I listen, directly on the Podbean app. If you'd like to toss a bit in my hat to keep the show going, as someone did just this week, I have a coffee button in my Instagram link tree. That's at Stag Podcast and at the Facebook page. Coffee, it's KO-FI, is an easy way to drop me a few bucks online to help keep this thing going. And if you've already donated, thank you. You know, we talked to Em Sauter about beer and food pairing, and she's really good at that, but she also pairs beer with other things, like Lord of the Rings characters. Gandalf and Triple, for example, national parks, the Everglades and salty sour Goza, and 80s movies, RoboCop, and the powerful hybrid Baltic Porter. Do check out Pints and Panels on Facebook for more of her endlessly inventive beer art, education, and tongue-in-cheek humor. The next episode is probably going to be on Clarion, PA. I had to travel out to Western PA recently to pick up some bar stools that an Amish furniture maker did for us, and I made the most of the trip to get material for 2 episodes on Clarion and Brookville. There are 3 really good breweries in Clarion, and that's worth talking about. You'll get to hear that next week, next Thursday. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Lou Bryson on Seen Through a Glass from the smack dab center of the Keystone State.